Nice to see everyone. Thanks to George and others for putting this panel together. International Trade Administration is a little bit of a unique viewpoint here because we're not a recipient of CHIPS funding and we're not the science part either, but we're sort of the glue, I would say, that helps make sure all these investments can be successful, both in terms of international engagement and also across the interagency. So I just wanted to take a little time today to talk about my team's work on a few different topics, including semiconductors, of course, because that's what the topic of this is. I also want to hit a little bit on supply chains and how we're thinking about what we can do to help secure resilient supply chains. And then I do want to touch a bit at the very end on our quantum supply chain work as well, just since I'm here. So in case you don't know much about the International Trade Administration, we're one of the 13 bureaus in the Commerce Department. You'll hear next from a colleague who's in the CHIPS program, the NSTC team. It's a wide variety of equities. International Trade Administration specifically is a key player in that, realizing the whole overall vision for the department, which is creating the conditions for economic growth and opportunity for everyone, all communities across the United States. And of course, with the International Trade Administration being inherently international, we're also very much looking at this from a global perspective. So at ITA, we actually have a network of, the latest number I have is 2,300 industry and trade experts. So some are in headquarters here in Washington, D.C., many are at cities across the United States, and then we have people at commercial service posts all across the world in at least 80 countries that I'm aware of, or 80 locations that I'm aware of. So all of those people together form this global network focused on promoting exports, attracting inbound investment to the United States, providing the data and analysis to inform some of these decisions. We work very much on protecting industry competitiveness. Sometimes that involves working with other governments in terms of addressing barriers to trade, making it possible for those companies to do their business, and also defending against unfair trade practices, which is something that we also spend quite a lot of time on. And so we do a lot of that through building up alliances with other countries, and sometimes just spending a lot of time in countries, having a lot of discussions. My team, and where I sit in ITA, is the Industry and Analysis Unit. We work more in depth, I would say, on some of those policy issues and really getting to know the industry sectors in detail. I don't need to tell this group that the Biden-Harris administration has made historic investments in the last few years in the United States competitiveness. A lot of the stuff Erwin just talked about, of course, the CHIPS program, and also, of course, the Inflation Reduction Act and the Infrastructure and Investment and Jobs Act. It's just like a wild time to be in government right now, to be honest. It's a very exciting time. While my team and the International Trade Administration is not executing those programs, we're working very closely, as everyone was saying, very much a whole of government effort here to make those programs as successful as possible. So we work very closely with all the parts of government trying to figure out some of those policy issues, working internationally. It's just been a very, very busy and somewhat new time because traditionally the US didn't really have programs like this that would target a certain sector, certainly not something like the CHIPS Act. It's a whole new endeavor. And so at ITA, we're really focused on helping firms of all sizes. We also want to help foreign investors, again, to be successful in our markets. We work a lot with US companies, but also policymakers and companies all across the country. And so my particular part in the International Trade Administration, as was mentioned earlier, I'm the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Manufacturing. That means that I'm covering a bunch of different offices that have very wildly different equities from, not that different than how Erwin was talking about, the health industries team, energy and environment team, transportation and machinery, which includes cars and planes, and advanced manufacturing, and then an ICT team, and information communication technologies, which is the home of our semiconductor team. But looking across that, it's really interesting and exciting times on the technology side, just how all these things are going to be very interconnected with artificial intelligence, with quantum, with 5G, 6G. You know, there's just a lot of interconnection happening there and a lot of exciting opportunity for US companies. So my experts are really working to understand how we can best help US companies be competitive, how to make sure they have aligned into the resources that they need access to, and also to make sure that when they're trying to compete abroad, they have a good access into that market. So there's a lot of this kind of commercialization aspects to what we do that I think is a little bit different flavor than some of the other speakers you'll hear about. And also from a government to government perspective, we spend a lot of time doing that. So I mentioned that I wanted to also briefly touch on supply chains. So I came into my role about a year and a half ago, so some of this had happened before I came into my current position, but the pandemic, I think, was just, a wake-up call for how critical and fragile some of these supply chains were, from high to low tech. And so I think it really caused a lot of us to think about what do we need to know to kind of avoid such a problem like this, and what kind of partnerships do we need to have in place, and also looking at that balance of what do we need to be able to make here domestically versus have access to from friends and allies. And so there's just been a lot of attention at our department on building up that supply chain resilience, and it's become clear that commerce has a really unique perspective there. We're not Department of Energy, Department of Defense, Health and Human Services, but we're really looking economy-wide. And so what you'll see coming out of the news, there was a teaser article this morning in the Financial Times about our supply chain center and a summit that we're holding tomorrow in Washington, D.C. But there'll be a lot more coming out soon, I think, about some of the tools we've been able to build that look across that economy and sort of assess a risk value that is going to hopefully be able to inform more of a data-driven discussion internally in our government and hopefully with friends and allies. How do we think about supply chains? Where should we be making those investments? And so knowing that it's very much a private sector concern, the business needs to know that they can get what they need to sell what they want to sell. We're also kind of looking across that at how can the US government be more proactive, getting ahead of challenges that might come up, how can we be more strategic, anticipating problems before they come, and then also working, again, very, very closely with allies, but also with our own companies to make sure that we're providing the best value where we can. And so I think more to come on that. Tomorrow's event will be a big opportunity, I think, for some of the first sort of data coming out of that approach to be seen, and there'll be just a lot more coming out in the near term. So that's kind of a key emphasis, and I would say going to semiconductors, that's been probably our first effort to really look at supply chains, and it has been in the semiconductor case, which is by necessity, of course, that I mentioned the pandemic was a wake-up call. In addition to a lot of supply chains that were disrupted, those that were so dependent on semiconductor chips were the ones that I think got a lot of attention. That's sort of why a lot of people in Washington know about semiconductor chips, is because of all these shortages that we experienced. And so I just want to kind of shed a little bit light on the ITA rule there. In general, we've had industry experts looking across this industry sector for a while, and in fact, it was people on the team, on my team, although I wasn't there, so I can't claim credit for this. They were really among the first in the US government, I would say about almost a decade ago, kind of saying, hey, there's something here, there's a strong overdependence here that we're a little bit worried about, looking at the market and the trade data. And so we've been already kind of been thinking about this. I can say I know the government people have been trying to manage and anticipate some challenges here, but it wasn't really until the pandemic and there was this wildly disruptive and catastrophic shortages that had to be addressed where we really started seeing the work pick up. But I do have a team that's very engaged on mapping choke points. We have created some early warning systems for industry and also with some of the allied governments that are creating a way for us to share information. That's more on the proactive side at this point. Hopefully that we don't have to overly leverage that, but creating that kind of infrastructure so that we'd be prepared in the future. And we do, of course, do a lot of international work. And another thing that's coming to my mind as I'm thinking here too is that we've also got a new effort with the G7 countries, which is very much a policy dialogue, but it's been interesting because we're talking about semiconductors, and I think the original framing, this is something that the Italian government wanted to have. They're the host country right now. Their year of hosting is almost over. They really, they were seeing where we were a year ago, and I'd be curious to hear the next people after me talk about this. It was a little bit more chaotic in terms of every country trying to figure out what they were going to do. And I think now that the dust is settling and some of those relationships are solidifying, we can have really productive conversations, whether it's at the G7 or with other kind of international multilateral dialogues to kind of, it's not hopefully we're all building something together And that work that we're doing in that policy forum kind of gives us that flavor, which has been, I think, a good sign. But it's a little bit challenging because everyone, of course, wants to have reap the economic benefits of this incredible technology, and so there's a lot of challenges that can emerge there. But I think in general, the meetings that I've been in have been very productive. I look forward to the rest of the conversations this afternoon on this as well. I don't want to take up too much more time, but as I promised at the end, I just wanted to say that I know today is about chips, but quantum has become a really obvious technology area for us as well. Like, what kind of industry is this going to be? Where can we be at best positioned to do those services that I mentioned that we do as our day-to-day in terms of trying to help companies be competitive, trying to open up markets? So we do have now finally somebody in my team who's focusing just on quantum, and she's going to be at a panel tomorrow, I think in this room. No, up in the other building, sorry, I'm looking right at her. But we want to be a part of these conversations with you all about what needs to happen so that we can understand how we're going to be best positioned to help make sure that those companies can be successful, and also so that we're really creating the right environment for all of these businesses as things move forward. So just wanted to say that, and looking forward to the rest of the conversation. Thanks.